This situation just got crazier as NHL insiders reveal shocking details on trade talks revolving around a St. Louis Blues star player, and we get even more as mock reports have been coming out with ridiculous trade offers. We're going to break down everything on these reports surrounding a star player on the St. Louis Blues going to an Eastern Conference team and so much more later on this episode. Before we get into that, if you're a Blues fan and you're watching this content and you're enjoying daily Blues news, make sure to go down and hit that free subscribe button. It helps us out a bunch, and in return, we'll give you updates from all around the Blues with prospects, trade reports, rumors, anything you want to know you can find right here on Blues Digest. But anyways, we're just going to hop straight into this today, where we did get some reports coming from Chris Johnson, and he said there were discussions between the Blues and other teams, specifically the Montreal Canadiens. I think they went pretty far down the road of exploring the possibility of a trade on Kyrou. Now, backing this up, Frank Cervelli goes in to say that they're pretty motivated to move that contract. Now, we were getting reports before his no trade clause kicked in, which we will touch on that and the mock trade later on, but just looking at these details, seeing that two reporters have went even farther, say they're motivated to move it, and that they were getting into discussions with other teams. What is your initial thoughts on the possibility that Kyrou might be going?
So listen, I mean, we know that July 1st, his no movement clause kicked in. There was a real rush, a real scramble. Those rumors, those reports, they were all real heading into July 1st that Jordan Kyrou could have been traded. They were trying to move his contract. That we know. And these new reports, these two reports are new. It's after July 1st. He has a no movement clause, but things are still heating up because they're still somewhat motivated to move the contract. And the other interesting thing that's come out of all of this is there's a report coming out of Montreal that Jordan Kyrou is actually open to waiving his no movement clause to go to the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, before July 1st, he could have been traded anywhere. It would have been easy for Doug Armstrong if he really wanted to move that contract, could have traded him anywhere, taken any offer that he wanted. Now it's a little bit more difficult, and I do wonder if they're still going to trade him anyway, why they didn't do it before July 1st, but nonetheless, they waited till his no movement clause kicked in. And Montreal seems like a suitor for him, first of all. They have a lot of, obviously they just finished making a trade, the Blues and the Montreal Canadiens. They have a lot of pieces that the Blues could use. But I think it's pretty interesting that he did come out and say that he would be open to moving to Montreal, to waiving his no movement clause, and that, a trade could work out in that way. So things are continuing to heat up. The situation is not calming down whatsoever. I thought it was going to once July 1st passed, and that if they didn't trade him before July 1st, that it was just going to be like, all right, we've made our bed. We're going with Jordan Kyrou. This is what it is. But it seems like things in terms of, him possibly being traded are not slowing down or not quieting down whatsoever.
And with the report, we're going to have that down in the description. If you want to go read through it as well, you're going to need a translator because it is in French. But we do know this team is actively looking to get better. We've seen them already making moves, bringing in Bukestad, filling out the bottom six, making a trade for Mayu. But it does seem like Doug Armstrong wants to continue to build this team going into next season. And now Chris Johnson continues on, saying now he has a huge say in anything that happens. And I think as a result of that, they're actually far less likely to see a trade, but I can't rule it out entirely. We'll see if anything goes there. Now, this came out just before we get the report on them saying that they're open to a trade to Montreal. That will all be down below, like I said. But moving on from Kyrou's contract is not going to be easy. This is a great value, $8.1 million. 430 goal scorer. We've seen how productive he has been over the years with the St. Louis Blues. Still only 27 years old. But the biggest thing, and like you alluded to, everyone's favorite word, is the fact that his no movement clause did kick in on July 1st. We're recording this on July 8th, so 7 days after. This gives Kyrou the full say. He can look at a team. Doug Armstrong can go out to make a trade. He can have all the framework done. And Jordan Kyrou can cross his arms and say, I don't want to go there. I would prefer this team, but they're offering less. And it puts you into a tricky situation with the reports coming out that he is reportedly open to the Montreal Canadiens. And we're going to touch on a mock trade with that. Could you see this being a suitor where we go back and Doug Armstrong says, hey, Kent Hughes, we've already made one trade. Let's go back and re-look at this.
I think it's very likely. If you look league wide, one team that Kyle Dubas liked to trade with when he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs is the St. Louis Blues. So you maintain those connections. So obviously, I could see it being a thing. I mean, if he does want to be traded, and I don't think he wants to be traded, I want to, make that difference. I want to make that known that I don't think that he wants to leave St. Louis. I don't think that they necessarily even want to trade him that badly. It'd just be nice, I guess, since you have some replacements coming up through the system to get rid of that $8.1 million, excuse me, and go out, fill in the lineup with some other pieces, maybe add on defense as well. But anyway, I do think that it's very likely because they've already made a trade. So it's going to be very interesting down the stretch here as we head into the season. If this, if anything else formulates from this, because, obviously things I think will quiet down a little bit on this front. They haven't really yet, but it will because he can't go to as many teams. It's probably the Montreal Canadiens, and that's it at this point. The other thing, like you alluded to, everyone's favorite term, of course, on the channel, but is the Montreal Canadiens. They have to take on all that salary, right? And you're probably going to have to take on some salary if you're the St. Louis Blues as well. There could be, some interesting pieces coming back the other way. It wouldn't be a perfect trade, of course. I think it could, and that's probably why they won't have, pull the trigger on this and actually make this happen, is because it's going to be a little bit of a crazy trade and probably won't make too much sense. And you're probably going to take back too much and maybe some expiring contracts as well. So don't think it makes too much sense at this point in time. But I think they missed the opportunity here. I still think the door is open. It's cracked open a little bit, but I think they missed a massive opportunity here to get a really, really good return for Jordan Kyrou and offload that money as well. Because when you look at the lineup, I mean, Snuggerud, right? Like he's maybe taken over that spot, has already maybe taken over that spot. Kyrou's falling, further and further down the depth chart. Still a great player, still going to offer you 70 to 80 points a year, but it's something that I think that they were, heavily considering this offseason, and it just got a little bit harder.
Because my big thing looking at this, I cannot see a world where Ken Hughes calls St. Louis or St. Louis calls Montreal and have a talk around Bolduc and Mailloux. I think this could have been a bigger picture where Jordan Kyrou was the framework. You go into, you figure out you can't make it work at that very moment. You like two different players and you go that route, but I could see them circling back. And like you said, with the line of Neighbors getting back up into the top six is going to be a big thing. Maybe Booch moves back down further, but we do know this is a team that does not need defense coming in. We have Mailloux, we have Tucker. They moved on from Leddy, but it does lead into an article, and this will be linked down below, where they go in and talk on possible pieces. Now, one piece, the most obvious name from this article says Patrik Laine, and this is not going to be a one-for-one trade. You're not going to get a value of Laine going in for Jordan Kyrou because he is worth more, but there is something to talk about. Listen, Patrik Laine has went through a lot of injuries. We know when healthy, Patrik Laine can be a very good goal scorer. Not over as much the past couple seasons. Power play, he has been incredible. But what is your thoughts on the possibility of maybe a trade happening? You would need someone to come in and retain salary. You're not going to be on a St. Louis side to take fully on Patrik Laine, but Darius, looking at this, would you do Patrik Laine, maybe a center like Kirby Dach, and draft capital and prospects for Jordan Kyrou?
I'm actually shocked that the original trade for Mailloux and Bolduc wasn't bigger. I was actually shocked when it was, just those two players. So I do wonder if they revisit some of this. I'm sure they were talking about Kyrou. There was talks and rumors, and of course, like I'm sure these rumors are coming from somewhere, especially when you know that both these teams are talking about these players behind closed doors in a trade. Kirby Dach, right, and that they could use some center depth. But I feel like that ship has also sailed at this point because of the center depth that you signed in free agency. So that could make some sense, but the salary is going to have to make sense as well. And if you're taking on more salary in Patrik Laine with $8.7 million, that's going to be tough to stomach. Although he only has 1 year left, and is he going to make the same? I mean, probably for his production and what he offers, at least offensively. But that's it, right? So do you want to take on a guy that offers only that offensively? He's great on the power play. We know that, but can he score any other ways, right? So do you want to trade Jordan Kyrou just for that? I don't think that makes much sense. If you're going to trade Jordan Kyrou, maybe you want some more defense, younger, more skilled defense that you can move into the future with, or maybe a center. But I feel like, again, that ship has sailed with some of the moves that you made through free agency, and they weren't waiting for the Montreal Canadiens, of course, right? You got to go out and make the moves that you want. Doug Armstrong did a great job rebuilding. I say rebuilding, just adding to the depth of this team this offseason. He's done a fantastic job and setting up Steen as well for next year. So It's going to be very interesting. I don't think it's going to necessarily slow down in terms of we're going to keep hearing things on Jordan Kyrou, but in terms of, where he's going to go, I think it's only Montreal at this point, and I just don't know if they're going to end up pulling the trigger because a trade for Jordan Kyrou has to make sense for the St. Louis Blues, and any outcome with Montreal, I just don't know if it makes sense with the way that this team is currently made up.
And I mean, if they wanted to go out and get a new center for this team, you can move Pye up. Looking at his stats, he was very productive with JT Miller in a couple seasons ago with the Vancouver Canucks, so you could move him up as a utility winger. But the biggest thing is, Blues fans, if Jordan Kyrou, if these reports coming from Chris Johnson, we see him coming from Frank Cervelli, there's so much talk around Jordan Kyrou with all of it linked down below if you want to read through it as well. But would you be fine moving out Kyrou? What pieces would you like coming back? Would you do a framework of maybe Patrick Laine and plus, whatever it is, coming back to St. Louis? Let us know down in the comments. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care, Blues fans.